Okay, so let's talk about some techniques of bass drum playing, marching bass drum playing that you can do at home. If you have a bass drum, if you have a bass pad, that's great. But a lot of you I know might not have either one of those. So you just have a practice pad that you can do some work. If we see certain things with you playing matched grip, that tells us a ton about what we can, talk to you about on the bass drum itself. But I kind of wanted to go nothing too crazy in depth, but just a kind of a baseline approach of our technique and how we're going to be talking about things in the fall. So, match grip snare drum. All right, so just match grip playing, you have what's close to a 90-degree angle. People are taught in different ways. It might be a little less than, it might be a little greater than, but let's just call it 90 for now. Okay, so you're playing 90. Wrist turn, the fingers, as you start playing quicker stuff, the fingers can get involved, but when you start thinking of individualistic bass parts, for the majority of that, it's really just from the wrist. If I were to play whatever the case may be, and the techniques that come behind that, if it's a little crescendo behind your own threes, making sure the left hand speaks just as much, if not a hair more than all this kind of stuff that we might talk about throughout your individual playing, it's still primarily based from the wrist. So the way we try to approach marching bass drum is very similar to how we would approach other instruments that have different things that you have to manipulate the hands in order to play the instrument well and get it to speak well, but not divert from what we all know, which is matched grip, how we all pretty much probably started playing in the first place. So if I were to take this 90-degree angle, fingers cradling the stick, nothing, I'm not squeezing at any point, and I were to drop that by my side, straighten my arms. Right now, my sticks are at a 45-degree angle from my body. And again, nobody's pulling out a protractor, but let's call it 90 here. So now my sticks are going to be at a 45-degree angle from my body. I'm going to bend up from my elbows, standing up as straight as I can. Bend up from my elbows to where my arms stop, my forearms stop parallel to the ground. And if you'll notice, now I'm stopped parallel to the ground, and my sticks are now at a 45-degree angle from my forearms. Ish. No, again, this is what we do. Other people do things different ways, but I have talked to a lot of people, and I have a pretty substantial amount of information that goes into this philosophy of playing. I'm getting older, so I don't get into those arguments much anymore, but it is what it is. This is what we do. You can learn something from everyone, but this is what I feel is the most accurate way for how we approach things. So you're at a 45-degree angle. Well, the bass rims might be a little wide. So just like this rim, we have to have a slight angle down in our playing. We have to have a slight angle down to clear that rim as well. Well, if you don't move the elbows with that, then you're left looking like this. On a drastic scale, of course. You're left looking at this, trying to clear that rim, but to keep the bass mallet close to the head. So we want to clear that rim just enough. Like we'll talk the specifics later. And then move the elbows out to where now the elbow is in a straight line all the way down my mallet. So that means the elbows are now in line with the mallet themselves. The forearms are in line with the mallet themselves. Okay? From this point, if I were to play just a normal slow stroke up, that's my wrist breaking up. Okay? So if I'm now turned this way, and I were to feel the exact same way, but on this plane, then I would turn, and my thumbnail is now still relatively on top of the mallet. So if I'm here, and I've got that angle in, my thumbnail is pretty much on top of the mallet, and I turn my wrist, my thumbnail is still on top of the mallet. Now, if we see a little bit of rotation inside of that wrist turn, I typically don't say anything as long as we see that the mallet path is straight on into the head. Same thing here. If we get too much rotation in my stroke, I'm playing snare drum like this. If I don't my hand is way too flat, then I'm in here. So nobody's asking you to contort your natural wrist and natural fingers and that. However, if I'm just playing and trying to get a straight as I can approach from bead path all the way back to the instrument, That's more of just a wrist turn, the knocking motion. So the same thing here. Although we're on a different plane, we're going to turn that wrist. And then some people will say the thumb still needs to be on top even when you're at fortissimo. Okay? Can the arm move out the further that you get? The higher and the louder that you play, sure. Just because I'm playing here doesn't mean I can't get a little more volume if I wanted to make fortissimo, fortissimo, and let the arm incorporate itself into my stroke. The same thing here. After my wrist turn, arm, and the arm can come back and wrist turn. We do that on a limited basis because it starts turning into some chicken wing type stuff that we really want to see that wrist breaking the entire time. But it's very, very similar to how you would play match grip snare drum. If you set up with a 45 and then you do nothing but rotate, that would be setting up here and then doing nothing but rotating. Hardly any wrist break at all would be that here as opposed to that. So again, I'm not saying we want to not have any rotation of the wrist whatsoever in the process of that stroke, but we definitely want to limit it and make sure that the wrist is breaking to get the most quality behind everything. And the way that we approach all of our instruments, the wrist is the thing that's initiating the mallet head or the bead. And we'll say make sure that the wrist is playing the rhythms. The faster that we get, that we know that fingers have to get involved and all that stuff. But again, individualistic bass parts might not have as much of that as possibly some other people. So just something to think about. We are very wrist oriented. Being wrist oriented does not mean mechanical. It doesn't mean tight. So anybody that makes those parallels, that doesn't make any sense when we don't say and squeeze the stick, which we never do. And play like a robot and never let anything rebound and always think down or into the bass head. Like we talk about rebound like crazy. So there's nothing mechanical about it. To me, and to the people that are going to be the adjudicators of the videos and the people that are going to be helping with the line throughout the season, that is the best possible option to ensure consistency from day to day, to make sure each sound is exactly where we would like those sounds to be. But that's just some information for you to kind of watch yourself here and take that to this plane and make sure that wrist is indeed breaking, making sure the mallet path is still moving as straight in and out of the bass head as possible. But just some information for you there. I hope that helped a little bit when it comes to our technique. By all means, are there going to be people that send in videos with their technique that they have learned and they have developed habits over the course of X amount of years? Absolutely. That's going to happen. It's up to us to determine who of these people are going to be able to adapt to what we would like them to do quicker. That happens easier in person, as we know, and we'll be doing some shifting around maybe at band camp after we send out the original roster. But hopefully that sheds a little bit of light on kind of what we do, how we do it. Knowing that I did forget one thing. Once you do, everything that we talked about with parallel forms, the elbows will be in a little bit different of a location depending on how big the drum is, but nothing from here all the way to the mallet head will change. So that just depends on how big or small your drum is. The elbows might have to come back, might have to push forward a little bit, and we try to do some stuff with the carrier to help you try to be as natural as possible with those elbows, but sometimes it is what it is, and we want to make sure that we're getting the best sound in the center of that drum. So we'll talk about a little bit about that a little bit later too. But if you have any questions, let me know. Hope this helps. Roll Tide, wash your hands, and look forward to seeing all of the videos. Let me know if you have anything. Thanks.